Navigation. Here's my 5 top tips of how to navigate using the compass. Let's go. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for clicking on the channel. You joined me today on this pretty sunny day here in Mid Wales. It's not raining for once, which is good. So this video is all about navigation. My 5 top tips on how to navigate using a compass. Now you might have seen a previous video I've done on my 5 top tips on navigating without a compass. I think it's there. So if you did check that one out, I can't remember when I done that. That was a while ago. This is the follow-up. Let's check it out. Right, I just got out the wind a little bit. Typical, isn't it? Come out for a walk, and even though it's sunny, the wind's picked up. So hopefully you can hear me on the camera. So navigation, extremely important, especially if you're going out outdoors. You might have the latest electronic devices, but there's nothing better than the old compass, if I can find it. There it is. And the knowledge how to use it. Now first thing, we'll talk about the compass. Now, there's loads of different compasses out there on the market, but I like to stick to the old base plate compass or map compass, mainly because this is what I was taught to navigate on in the army, and before that even in the army cadets. So always stick to this, but yeah, each to their own, isn't it? I'll tell you more about how you can get yourself on a navigation course later on in the video. So if you did want to learn more about it, yeah, there are ways to do it here at the bug out and elsewhere. Right, so yeah, the compass, like I said, this is a base plate compass or a map compass, and it's got several different features. So on there you've got your housing, which contains your degrees or your mils. There's 360 degrees or 6,400 mils. Plus you've got your needle, which is magnetic. You've got your orientation lines or orienteering lines, whatever you want to call them. And you've got the bezel itself, which moves. So up from the housing, you've got magnifying glass, very useful, especially if your eyesight's not the best, close up. You've got your direction of travel arrow, and you get all these luminescents. I'll talk about them later on. You'll find them on the base plate and on the bezel itself, and inside the housing. So this make of compass is silver. I stock these in a shop. I think they're one of the best on the market, and you can use cheaper compasses as long as they're true and obviously they point you in the right direction. You're alright, aren't you? And what else is on here is your aromas and your scales and different markings. We're not going to talk too much about them today. We're going to stick on my 5 top tips. So that's your compass. So let's get into it. So my first top tip for navigating using a compass is setting your map to ground, or orientating your map to ground, whatever you want to call it. Now in my other video, which is there again, I did show you how you could set your map to ground or orientate your map to ground using features which you can see. But if you haven't got any features you can see, you can still orientate your map to ground, like pointing in the right direction as such, using your compass, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So let's get the map out. This one I'm using today is a 1 in 25,000 map. So as I said in my previous video, and I'll keep going on about it, you got your eastings and northings on the map, which are these blue lines going horizontal and vertical, and they form squares on the map, and each square on the map is 1 kilometre. So I'm in the middle of this woodland. I can't see any features I can relate to on the map, so there's no way I can use the features on the ground to orientate my map in the right direction. So this is where you're going to use a compass. Now the easiest way I found to do it, so you want to turn your bezel to this on north, or 0 degrees, or your orienteering lines are pointing in the same direction as your direction of travel arrow. Everything's pointing up towards the top of the compass. Then you got your map out, and so you haven't got a clue which way you're supposed to point, because you can't relate it to any features on the ground. So what you want to do, you want to get the edge of your compass or in line of one of your eastings, which is they go from east to west, eastings. The edge of the compass is on the blue line. So everything is pointing towards the top of the map. So everything's pointing grid north. Your orientation lines, the direction arrow, and the edge of your compass is all pointing towards the top of the map, pointing grid north. So once you've done that, Make sure you hold the compass tightly onto the map so this line doesn't move, and just turn the map and compass together until your needle, which points to north, is in line with your orientation lines and your direction of travel arrow. So all these lines line up. See that? Easy, isn't it? I think some people say get the red in the shed, but I don't bother with that. So yeah, all the lines are lined up. Now when you look at your map, that map is pointing in the right direction. So that's how you set the map to ground. Like I said before, you can use features and you can relate them on the map just to double check. But if you can't see any features, or if you're in the woodland or even at night, low visibility, use your compass, get it in line with your eastings, everything pointing up, and then move your map and compass till your needle is pointing to the direction of travel. Then your map is set to ground. There, clear as mud, isn't it? But it's pretty straightforward. Like I say, if you get everything lined up, the edge of your compass and your direction of travel arrow and your orientation lines are all in line, parallel with your eastings on the map, or the vertical lines, and then you just move them both together so the magnetic needle is pointing in the same direction as well. Your map is set to ground, orientated to the ground, whatever you want to call it. So that's my first top tip: how to set your map to ground, or orientate your map to ground using the compass. How's that? It's better. Right, you set your map to ground. That's easy, isn't it? Now my second top tip when navigating with a compass is taking a bearing. Now, what is taking a bearing, I hear you say? So a bearing is your direction of travel set on a certain degrees on the compass. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. If you see a point of reference on the direction you want to go, I can see up here now is a telegraph pole. I can use the compass, point my direction of travel arrow, this little thing here, at that telegraph pole, and turn the bezel until the magnetic needle is in line with my orientation lines in the bezel. Now you notice on this particular compass, like on most I think these days, you've got some luminescence either side of the orienteering lines. That's to obviously help you do the same thing if you're in the dark. So once I got that, you've got your bearing. In this case it's 280 degrees. Now you can make a note of that and you can transfer that onto your map, or you can just use your compass now, keeping that magnetic needle pointing in line with the orientation lines, and walk on that bearing. So that's taking a bearing on an object or a relief that you can see on the ground. But you can also take a bearing off the map and then transfer that on what you can see on the ground. And that's what I'm going to show you now. Now as you can see, we're at this point here, crossroads of a few paths, footpaths, and I want to follow this path down to this crossing point here where it crosses a brook. Now I can take a bearing on the map. So what you do with that, you've got your direction of travel arrow, obviously which way you want to go, isn't it? So you put your edge of the compass on your start point and then line the edge of the compass to the end point, just like that. So you've got the direction of travel arrow, obviously the direction you want to go. You've got the edge of the compass lined up from the start point to the end point. So now you want to turn the bezel of your compass all the way around until the magnetic needle is pointing in line with your orienteering or orientation lines, or in between the two luminescence. Like I said before, get the red in the shed, some people say. So you set your map to ground and you're taking a bearing from your start point to your end point by lining up the compass, direction of travel arrow, turning the bezel till the magnetic needle's pointing in line with the orientation lines. And then that gives you your bearing, your degrees on the bezel. So at that point then, all you got to do is move the compass around until the magnetic needle is pointing in line with the orientation lines, or the reds in the shed again. And then that will give you your direction of travel, which way to go. Now again, it's not something you'd use in this sort of glorious weather, but if you're at night or low visibility, this will ensure you're going in the right direction. So I think that's clear enough. This is my second tip on how to navigate using a compass, and that's taking a bearing. So what I'm going to do now, I'll walk on this bearing, hopefully you're going the right direction, and then I'll tell you my third top tip. Let's go. Now, like I said in my other video, map reading video, a good tip is if you're walking with a map, instead of like trying to find out where you are every time you stop, keep your thumb on the map on either where you're going or where you just left. That way, when you do want to look at the map, look at where your thumb is, and it should be somewhere near on the map, isn't it? So you're not taking the map out and searching everywhere trying to find your location. It should be somewhere near where your thumb is. So right, so we set the map to ground, or orientate the map to ground, so we know it's pointing in the right direction. And now we're in a bit of a clearing. You can double check that with the features you can see. So you can use them physical features you can see on a map with your compass, and you can make sure your map is pointing in the right direction. So you need your map orientated to the ground before you take a bearing, and we've done a bearing, haven't we? We've used the edge of the compass to get the 2 points of reference on the map, where we're starting and where we're going. Turn the bezel to get the right degrees, then we use that degrees or compass bearing to point us in the right direction, the direction of travel. Now you can walk on that bearing, but it's pretty difficult to keep walking, trying to keep that magnetic needle in line with the orientation lines, or keeping that red in the shed. Yeah, because it keeps moving about, isn't it, when you're walking. So my third top tip is called attack points. No, I'm not talking about section attacks or anything like that. It's attack points on the map. So you've got a route, you're taking a bearing, you want to get from point A to point B. Now it might be several hundred yards from point A to point B. There's a lot of scope of making a mistake, isn't it? You might not have noticed, but you might have veered off your bearing, you know, a few paces to the left or a few paces to the right, and then you corrected yourself, and then you're walking on that bearing again. The problem is the bearing you're walking on now is not the correct one, isn't it? It's slightly different to the one you started off with. So attack points is a way of splitting up your route into several legs. So what I tend to do, my best top tip, is once you're taking your bearing and you're pointing it on the direction you want to go, have a look down the direction of travel arrow, and then see if you can pick up something which is online on your route, isn't it? All right, so it could be a gate post, it could be a tree, it could be any feature on the ground or on the map. So in this case, I can look down here, I can see a fence post which is on our direction of travel. I can forget about holding the compass in and just walk straight to that fence post. So once I get to that fence post, again, I could look at my direction of travel arrow on my bearing, pick out another feature, and then walk to that. You've got less chance of making a mistake then, haven't you? Again, you don't need it in this weather where you can see, you know, hundreds of meters, whatever. But at night or low visibility, yeah, that's a really good tip to use, so you don't veer off your route, isn't it? You know, where you're supposed to go. Now, another side of attack points is each attack point, or your different legs of your route, don't have to be in a straight line. So you could say on the map, and you want to get from this point to that point, you'll notice there's another feature there. You can still split that route into different legs, but it doesn't have to travel in a straight line. You can go from that point to that feature, and once you get to there, you can take a bearing from that feature to another feature, take a bearing from there, and once you get to there, you take a bearing from that feature to your end, and then onto another feature. So you keep taking bearings. Shorter legs means less chance of making a mistake. So like I said, this is a great tip for night navigation, or if you lose visibility. You know, the cloud cover comes down, you can't see more than 20-30 yards in front of you. It could be on top of the hillside, the mountainside. This is where you want to use your bearings to make sure you're going the right direction, and then use your attack points to make sure you don't veer off that bearing. And using attack points is also very good in if you're in a woodland or a forestry where everything looks the same, doesn't it? All the trees are there. So you could, once you've got your bearing, or you've got your direction of travel you want to go, you can pick out a certain tree. It might only be 20 yards in front of you. Walk to that tree, get on the back side of it, get your compass out, look at your bearing and your direction of travel, and then pick out another tree, another feature, and then walk to that. So what I've got to do now, I've got my bearing, I've got point A to point B, we're going down there. I've got my direction of travel now by turning the compass so the magnetic needle's in line with the orienteering lines. I can look down my compass on the direction of travel. I can see that fence post or gate post is in line with my direction I'm going to go. So I can put the compass down, I am going to worry about trying to walk and look at the compass at the same time, I can just walk straight to that fence post or gate post, and then I can do another leg from there. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's my third tip on my top 5 navigating with a compass, and that's attack points. Now let's get to this attack point and I'll show you another tip. So yeah, just going over attack points again. Great tip to use. Not only can you use attack points to break up your leg of your journey from different feature to different feature, you can also use attack points, like I said, in your direction of travel. But you can also use a thing called leapfrogging or stepstoning. So leapfrogging or stepstoning is a bit like attack points, where if there's very low visibility or you're navigating at night, you can send one of your party out 20-30 yards or whatever until you can see them, and tell them to move left or right until they're in line with your direction of travel.
Right a bit.
When they are,
right a bit.
get them to stop, and then you walk to them, using them as an attack point. Once they're there, then they'll walk on again, over 20-30 yards, and then do the same again, or take turns, isn't it? So yeah, that's leapfrogging or stepstoning. So tip number 4 is what's called aiming off. What is aiming off? Well, on your route, there might be a feature that you have to cross. It might be a gateway over a fence or a wall. It might be a bridge over a river. It might even be a junction in a road, and you need to take the right junction, T-junction, crossroads, wherever it is, and you don't want to miss it. Now you already know how to take your bearings, and you've set your bearing, and you're heading straight forward. And what happens if you miss? What happens if you miss just slightly to the left or to the right, and you just keep on going, and you don't know, and you just, you know, you're walking, before you know it, you think, bloody hell, I should have hit this bloody feature by now. So aiming off is a way of making sure you get to that feature, okay? And how do you do it? Well, it's by aiming off, isn't it? So for example, I've got a fence over there now, which is on this footpath. Now on that fence is a crossing point, a stile. Now in these weather conditions, I can see it. But at night, or very low visibility, and you can't see this crossing point, but you need to get to it, you can't afford to miss it, what you do, you purposely, with your bearings, aim off either left or to the right. So, I know it sounds a bit odd, doesn't it, but this is what you do. You got your map, set the map to the ground, you've got the bearing now from this point to the point you want to go. Now I'm going to aim off now purposely just to the right of it, 100 meters, okay, and set my bearing to that. Now if I was in really poor conditions or pitch black and no light whatsoever, just to be sure, I'd probably aim off a little bit more, maybe 200 meters, just to make sure I get to that fence line or wall, whatever it is, and I know then that the feature I need to cross is going to be down from me 200 meters, isn't it? Or in this case 100 meters. That gives you a little bit of leeway in case you are off and you're on your bearing slightly. It's no good aiming too close to it, you know, aim off 50 meters, whatever, and then you're slightly out, and then you don't know if you missed it left or right, innit? So you might as well give yourself plenty of scope, aim off, you know, at least 100 meters, 200 meters, and then purposely on the either side, this case on the right. When we get to that linear feature, we know we've got to go left until we hit the crossing point. Make sense? So same as before, you've got your start point, you've got the feature you want to get to, just aim off it, in this case 100 meters, set your bearing. Now I'll walk on that bearing knowing that that feature is purposely to my left. That way I shouldn't miss it. Let's go for it. Right, so we've got this linear feature. In this case is a fence, but it could be a road, like say, and you want to get to a junction. Could be a wall and you need to get to a gate. could be a river or a stream and you need to get to a bridge. You purposely aimed off to the right by X amount of meters, in this case 100. But now I know I purposely got to walk left or downhill and I should find the crossing point. It just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and it takes the risk out as well of if you aim straight for a feature you want to get to and then you miss it left or right. So you purposely aim off to one direction and then, not the band, and then come down to where you need to go. Simple enough. Right, so let's walk down here now and we should find the crossing point. Hopefully you can still hear me in the wind. It's picked up a bit. Right, my last tip, tip number 5 on my top 5 tips on navigating with a compass, and that's back bearings. What are back bearings? Well, it's exactly the same as taking a bearing really, but in reverse. Hopefully that's a bit better out the wind now. So back bearings, what are they? Well, say you've taken the bearing now, you've got to a point, you've done all the rest of it, you set your map to ground and all that, you've got your route, you've got your legs, your attack points, you're taking a bearing from one attack point to the other, and you want to start walking on it. So you're walking so far on that bearing, and you feared that you can veer off, right? You've got quite a long way to go, we've got a couple hundred meters to go before the next leg or the next attack point, and you veered off from it. How do you check? How do you check you're still in the right position, you're still on that direction of travel where you should be? Well, it's quite simple. As long as you can still see your point of reference where you left, you can take a back bearing and still make sure you're on the right direction, isn't it? Make sure you're still on that right path on where to go. Now again, today you don't need it because the weather's pretty good, except for the wind. But if you're in low visibility, especially on top of a hill, before you lose sight of your last attack point, your last point of reference, you want to take a back bearing to make sure you're still on that correct line of travel. Say we're at this crossing point now, there's another crossing point way over in the distance here. That's what we want to get to. You've taken your bearing off the map from point A to point B. There it is. So what we do, we walk on that bearing and we get about halfway across. Let's pretend there's no visibility, and before I lose sight of this last reference point, we'll take a back bearing to make sure we're still on that right direction. Okay, let's go. Right, so I come about halfway across the field from point A to point B, and I purposely veered off the bearing. It's quite hard to walk on a bearing. This is why you use your attack points like we said before, but this time I purposely come off the bearing, just veered off a little bit, and now we want to check I'm in the right direction. So what you're going to do now is make a back bearing to make sure it points onto where you just come. Now you could alter the bezel, turn it 180 degrees and then using that bearing then to take you back, but I don't bother with this. The easiest thing to do, instead of having the red in the shed or the magnetic north needle pointing in line with the orientation lines, just turn the compass round so the magnetic south is pointing in line with the orientation lines. And that gives you a direction of travel, so where you've just been, and you can see we're way off, nowhere near where we crossed the fence line. Should be down here somewhere. So what we do now, we just move ourselves, obviously with the compass, until this direction of travel lines up to where we just come from. So that's what we're going to do now. So now we just come down hill to our left about 50 meters, and you can see now the direction of travel arrow is pointing to where we just come from. I know now I'm standing in the direct line of the original bearing without even touching the compass, and I'm back on that direct line where I should be going. So if we look at the compass now, use it with the north, the direction of travel is pointing where we're going to go. So that's taking a back bearing, just checking that you are still going in the right direction. Again, you only use it really if there's low visibility, and you've got to do it before you lose sight of your last point of reference, haven't you? Now I've come to where now is slightly less windy, hopefully. And just to talk about the last point, that's where you can use your back bearings or your bearings to find your location on the map. So you're in a location, you don't know exactly whereabouts you are, a rough idea, but not exactly. But if you want to find out more of an exact location where you are, you can use your bearings. Now to do this, you want a minimum of 2 points of reference where you can take bearings off, and these are going to be features on the ground which you can relate to on the map. Right, using your bearings, first set the map for ground like I showed before. Pick out a reference. So there's a hill just up here, you can see it on there, with a wind turbine on it. So I'm looking on my map, there it is. So what I can take a bearing now off the compass. So I point my direction of travel arrow at that feature, turn the bezel so the magnetic north is in line with the orientation lines. So there's my bearing. Now I can make a note of that bearing and write it down in my notebook and then get another feature. What I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to draw it straight in the map. So with the map set to ground and my bearing of that feature, I'm just going to put the edge of the compass on that feature, move the compass until the magnetic needle is in line with the direction of travel arrows and the orientation lines, then draw a line on the map using the edge of the compass. That should be my bearing from that feature. Though I know I should be somewhere on that line. Now, where on that line, who knows, isn't it? So this is why you need a second point of reference. So I'm going to use that trig point over there on that hill. A good standout feature. Again, take my compass, point it at that feature, move my bezel until magnetic north is in line with the orientation lines. That gives me my bearing. Put the edge of the compass on that trig point, on that reference point, move the compass around and then draw a line. Now if the lines don't meet, they're short, just keep drawing a line until they do meet. Yeah. Then where they meet, that's where you should be. Now if you can find a third feature, take a bearing the same on that one, draw a line. If that line then hits the 2 points where the other lines meet, that's where you know then, that's exactly where you are on the map, isn't it? All 3 lines meet, that's where you are. Now you can draw that on your map just using the bearings or switching the compass around and using the back bearings. But either way will give you the correct line and bearing from that reference point to where you are. Now, I hear some of you saying, what about declination? What is declination? Well, believe it or not, there are 3 types of north. You've got your grid north, your magnetic north, and your true north. Now, before somebody say, what? 3 norths? Yeah, well, your grid north is your lines on your map. They're parallel with each other, yeah? Your magnetic north is where your little needle points to. And true north is the top, very top of the globe. Yeah, the very top of the globe. Now, because we're on a ball, yes, the world is a globe. Some of you might get upset about that. If you transferred them lines from the top of the globe, true north, onto the map, they'd be slightly beveled. Yeah, ever so slightly. Because when you're making a map, it's square and you want to keep all the lines parallel with each other. Grid north is slightly off true north. And of course, magnetic north changes all the time, doesn't it? It always moves. So that's your 3 norths. And declination is basically the calculation you use to get from magnetic north to grid north, or from grid north to magnetic north. But in the UK at the moment, it's basically 0, you know, so it's not worth worrying about. And plus, if you do want to learn more about that, get yourself on a nav course. Which brings me to my last point. So if you are into navigation and you want to learn more about it, about the ins and outs of it, yeah, these are just 5 tips. But if you want to go into a bit more depth, get yourself on a nav course, get on the website. The information will be below, and it's a great skill to learn. And like I said before, with every skill, the more you practice it, the better you get, isn't it? So there we are, guys. Here's my video. The rain's starting to come in now, so it's a good time to end, isn't it? There's my 5 top tips to navigate with a compass. So if you find out of interest, please think about liking and subscribing, hit the notification bell, and if you do want to see some more videos, check that one out and that one, and I'll catch you again next time. All the best.